The stallion's hooves thundered across the dusty plain as Jackson Wade raced against the setting sun, a desperate attempt to outrun the ghosts that had haunted him for the past 3 years. His weathered face, once quick to smile, now bore the permanent lines of a man who had lost his reason for living. The year was 1878, and the untamed territory of Wyoming had been both his salvation and his torment since Emma's passing. Their small ranch outside Clearwater Springs sat nestled between rolling hills and a crystal creek, a paradise they had built together that now felt like a hollow mockery of the life they'd planned. "Come on, Thunder," Jackson muttered, urging his horse faster as dark clouds gathered on the horizon. The first drops of rain hit his face as he approached the modest 2-story home that housed what remained of his family, his 7-year-old son Samuel and 5-year-old daughter Lily. Mrs. Peterson, a kindly widow from town who looked after the children while Jackson tended the ranch, met him at the door with a tight-lipped expression that spoke volumes. "Another difficult day, Mr. Wade?" she asked, handing him a cup of coffee as he removed his hat and hung it on the rack by the door. Samuel refused to eat again. She continued without waiting for his response. "And Lily barely spoke a word since breakfast." Jackson nodded, a familiar ache spreading through his chest. His children were slipping away from him, lost in their own grief while he struggled to find a way to reach them. "Thank you, Mrs. Peterson. I'll see you tomorrow," he said, his voice rough from disuse. After the older woman departed, Jackson stood in the quiet hallway, listening to the sound of rain against the windows. The house felt cold despite the fire crackling in the hearth. He made his way to the kitchen, where plates of untouched food sat on the table. "Pa," a small voice called from the stairs. Lily stood in her nightgown, her dark hair falling in tangles around her shoulders, so much like her mother's it made his heart constrict. "You should be in bed, sweetheart," Jackson said, softening his tone as he approached her. "I heard thunder. Is it going to storm bad?" Her eyes, wide and fearful, looked up at him. Jackson knelt down, bringing himself to her level. "Just a little rain. Nothing to worry about." Lily nodded, but the worry didn't leave her face. "Samuel is pretending to be asleep again." Jackson sighed. His son had become increasingly withdrawn, shutting himself away from both his father and sister. "I'll go check on him." After tucking Lily back into bed, Jackson paused outside his son's door, gathering his courage before knocking softly. "Sam, you awake, son?" No answer came, but Jackson could feel that Samuel was listening. He pushed the door open to find his son lying rigidly under the covers, eyes firmly shut in an unconvincing performance of sleep. Jackson sat on the edge of the bed, the wooden frame creaking under his weight. "I know you're awake." Samuel's eyes remained closed, but his breathing quickened. "I miss her too, you know," Jackson said quietly. "Every day." His son's eyes flew open then, filled with an anger that startled Jackson with its intensity. "You never talk about her. It's like you want to forget Mama." The accusation hit Jackson like a physical blow. "That's not true, Sam." "Is too," Samuel insisted, sitting up. "You're always working. You don't care that she's gone." Jackson reached for his son, but Samuel pulled away, turning to face the wall. The rejection stung, but Jackson understood it. He'd been distant, throwing himself into ranch work rather than facing the grief that threatened to consume him. "Get some sleep," he finally said, standing. "We've got cattle to move tomorrow." Later that night, as rain lashed against the windows and thunder rolled across the plains, Jackson sat at the kitchen table with a bottle of whiskey and Emma's photograph. Her smile, forever preserved in sepia tones, seemed to mock him and his failure to keep their family whole. "I don't know how to do this without you," he whispered to the silent image. "They need their mother." The next morning dawned clear and bright, the storm having passed during the night. Jackson rose before the sun, as was his habit, and began the day's chores. By the time Mrs. Peterson arrived, he was ready to head out to check the herd. "There's a new schoolteacher coming to town today," Mrs. Peterson mentioned as she bustled about the kitchen. "A young woman from back east. Mayor Jenkins says she's highly qualified." Jackson grunted in response, disinterested in town gossip. Clearwater Springs had seen its share of Eastern transplants who rarely lasted more than a season before the harsh realities of frontier life sent them scurrying back to civilization. "Might be good for the children to start school again," she continued, undeterred by his lack of enthusiasm. especially Samuel. That boy needs something to occupy his mind. Jackson considered this as he pulled on his gloves. Samuel had been an eager student before Emma's death, but he hadn't attended school in over a year. Perhaps it was time. "I'll think about it," he conceded, which was enough to put a satisfied smile on Mrs. Peterson's face. Out on the range, Jackson lost himself in the rhythm of work. He checked fences, moved cattle to fresher grazing lands, and repaired a water pump that had been damaged in the storm. It was late afternoon when he spotted riders approaching his foreman, Ben Davis, accompanied by a wagon he didn't recognize. "Boss," Ben called out as they drew closer. "Got a situation in town that needs your attention." Jackson frowned. "What kind of situation?" "Stage got held up about 10 miles east. Driver was killed, and there was only one passenger, the new schoolteacher." Ben shifted uncomfortably in his saddle. "She's pretty shaken up. Mayor asked if we could put her up until they sort things out, seeing as how you've got the extra room and all." Jackson's frown deepened. "There's the hotel in town. Booked full with a cattle buyers convention," Ben explained. "It would just be for a few days, boss. Sheriff's already on the trail of the bandits." Before Jackson could protest further, the wagon pulled alongside them, and he got his first glimpse of the woman inside. She sat straight back despite her obvious fatigue, her honey-colored hair pulled back in a practical knot at the nape of her neck. Her clothes, though dusty from travel, were finely made a dark blue traveling dress with a matching jacket. "Mr. Wade," she acknowledged him with a nod. "I apologize for the imposition. I assured Mayor Jenkins this arrangement was unnecessary, but he was quite insistent." Her voice carried the refined cadence of formal education, but there was a strength to it that surprised him. "Mississippi?" Jackson raised an eyebrow. "Winters. Willa Winters." She extended a gloved hand, which Jackson took after a moment's hesitation. "I was to begin teaching at your town school next week, but it seems circumstances have accelerated our meeting." Jackson released her hand and glanced at Ben, who was watching the exchange with barely concealed interest. "I suppose you'd better come to the house then," Jackson said reluctantly. "We've got the room, as Ben mentioned." "Thank you," Willa replied, her expression carefully neutral. "I promise not to be a burden." The ride back to the ranch was uncomfortably silent. Jackson rode ahead, occasionally glancing back at the wagon where Miss Winters sat beside Ben, her posture never faltering despite the rough terrain. As they approached the house, Jackson felt a twinge of embarrassment at its state. Since Emma's death, he'd let many things slide: the peeling paint on the porch, the overgrown garden that had once been her pride. It was still a substantial home by frontier standards, but it lacked the warmth and care that had once defined it. Mrs. Peterson emerged from the house as they arrived, her eyes widening at the sight of their unexpected guest. "Land's sakes, is that the new schoolteacher?" she exclaimed. "Miss Winters, this is Mrs. Peterson." Jackson introduced them as he helped Willa down from the wagon. "She helps with the children." "A pleasure, madam," Willa said, straightening her skirts. "I apologize for arriving unannounced." Mrs. Peterson waved away her concerns. "Nonsense. We're just glad you're safe after such an ordeal. Come inside, and I'll fix you something to eat." As the women headed into the house, Ben pulled Jackson aside. "Sheriff thinks it was the Delaney gang that hit the stage. Said they've been working their way north from Colorado." Jackson nodded grimly. The Delaney gang was notorious for their brutality. The driver was the only casualty? This time, Ben confirmed. Miss Winters said they didn't bother with her or her belongings once they realized the strongbox was empty. Stage was just carrying mail. "Lucky for her," Jackson muttered. "Boss," Ben hesitated, then continued, "it might not be bad having her around for a bit. The kids could use some new company." Jackson shot him a warning look. "Don't start, Ben." "Just saying." Ben held up his hands in surrender. "Anyway, I'd better get back to town and let the mayor know she's settled." Inside, Jackson found Mrs. Peterson showing Willa to the guest room, chattering about the town and its residents. His children were nowhere to be seen, likely hiding as they often did when strangers visited. "The children are upstairs," Mrs. Peterson confirmed his suspicions. "I've told them we have a guest, but they're being shy." "It's quite all right," Willa assured her. "We'll have plenty of time to become acquainted." Jackson cleared his throat. "Miss Winters, I apologize for the circumstances, but you're welcome to stay until other arrangements can be made." "That's very kind of you, Mr. Wade," Willa replied. "I hope to repay your hospitality by being of some assistance while I'm here." There was something in her direct gaze that unsettled him, a perceptiveness that made him feel exposed. "Mrs. Peterson takes care of things," he said abruptly. "You should rest after your ordeal." He retreated to the barn, finding comfort in the familiar tasks of caring for the horses. It wasn't until the sun began to set that he returned to the house, bracing himself for the awkwardness of having a stranger at his table. To his surprise, he entered the kitchen to find Samuel and Lily sitting at the table while Willa read aloud from a book she must have salvaged from her luggage. Mrs. Peterson was preparing dinner, a small smile playing on her lips as she worked. Jackson paused in the doorway, struck by the scene. It had been months since he'd seen Samuel so engaged, leaning forward slightly as he listened to the story. Lily's eyes were wide with wonder, her small hand occasionally reaching out to touch the illustrations Willa showed them. And then, Willa was saying, her voice animated as she read. The clever fox realized he didn't need to reach the grapes at all. Sometimes the things we think we want aren't meant for us. But why did he say they were sour? Lily asked, breaking her usual silence with a curious tilt of her head. Sometimes people say things they don't mean when they're disappointed, Willa explained gently. Like when Pa says he's not tired, but he falls asleep in his chair? Samuel asked, and Jackson felt a flush of embarrassment creep up his neck. Willa looked up then and noticed him standing there. "Mr. Wade," she acknowledged with a smile. "Your children have been kind enough to keep me company. They're quite the attentive audience." "I can see that," Jackson said, moving further into the room. "What's the story?" "Aesop's Fables." Willa held up the book. "I always bring it when I travel. The stories may be old, but the lessons are timeless." "Papa, Miss Winters knows so many stories," Lily said, excitement bringing color to her usually pale cheeks. "And she promised to teach me about maps tomorrow," Samuel added, his earlier hostility temporarily forgotten in the face of this new distraction. Jackson nodded, unsure how to respond to this sudden animation in his children. "That's good. Dinner's ready," Mrs. Peterson announced, saving him from further awkwardness. "Mr. Wade, would you care to say grace?" The meal passed with surprising ease. Willa asked the children questions about the ranch and their interests, drawing them out with a natural skill that Jackson couldn't help but admire. Even Samuel, who had been surly and withdrawn for so long, seemed eager to impress her with his knowledge of horses and cattle. After dinner, when the children had been sent to prepare for bed, Willa helped Mrs. Peterson clear the table despite the older woman's protests. "You must be exhausted, Miss Winters," Mrs. Peterson said. "The stage robbery, and then coming to a strange house, it's too much for any young lady." "I've found that keeping busy helps in difficult situations," Willa replied, rolling up her sleeves to wash dishes. "Besides, I'm tougher than I look." Jackson, who had been about to retreat to the porch with his pipe, paused at her words. There was something in her tone, a hint of past hardship, perhaps, that rang true. "Mrs. Peterson, you should head home before it gets too dark," he said. "I can see Miss Winters settled." The older woman looked between them with barely concealed interest before gathering her things. "If you're sure, Mr. Wade, I'll be back in the morning as usual." After she left, an awkward silence fell over the kitchen. Willa continued washing dishes while Jackson stood uncertainly by the door. "You don't need to do that," he finally said. "I don't mind," Willa responded without looking up. "It gives me something to focus on besides replaying today's events." Jackson moved to take a dish from her, their fingers brushing briefly. "The stage robbery," he said. "That must have been terrifying." Willa's hands stilled in the soapy water. "It wasn't my first encounter with danger, Mr. Wade, though I admit watching a man die was difficult." The matter-of-fact way she said it caught him off guard. "You've had trouble before?" A small, sad smile crossed her face. "Let's just say the journey west hasn't been quite what the pamphlets promised." Before he could inquire further, they were interrupted by Lily's appearance in the doorway, her nightgown trailing on the floor. "Papa, will you tuck me in?" she asked, her voice small. "Of course, sweetheart," Jackson said, grateful for the interruption. "Miss Winters, please don't feel obligated to finish here." "Good night, Miss Winters," Lily said shyly. "Good night, Lily." Willa smiled warmly at the child. "Perhaps tomorrow you can show me your favorite spot on the ranch." Lily's face brightened at the suggestion. I could show you the wildflowers by the creek. I'd like that very much, Willa replied. As Jackson led his daughter upstairs, he glanced back to see Willa watching them, an unreadable expression on her face. For the first time in years, his home felt different, as if something long dormant was stirring back to life. Lily chattered excitedly as he tucked her into bed, asking questions about Miss Winters and when they could go to the creek. She's only staying a few days, Lily, Jackson cautioned, not wanting his daughter to grow attached to someone who would soon leave. But she's going to be our teacher, Lily pointed out. So we'll see her at school, right? Jackson hesitated. He hadn't decided whether to send the children back to school yet. We'll see, he said noncommittally. I like her, Papa, Lily continued, undeterred. She doesn't look at us like we're broken. The simple observation struck Jackson with unexpected force. Had that been how others saw his family? How he saw them? You're not broken, sweetheart, he assured her, smoothing her hair back from her forehead. Then why are you always so sad? She asked with a child's directness. Jackson had no answer that wouldn't hurt her more. I'm trying not to be, he said finally. Get some sleep now. Samuel was already in bed when Jackson checked on him, but unlike most nights, he wasn't pretending to be asleep. Pa, he said as Jackson sat on the edge of his bed. Miss Winters said her pa taught her to read maps and navigate by the stars. Do you think you could teach me that too? Jackson felt a pang of regret for all the things he'd neglected to share with his son. I could, he agreed, though I'm not sure I know as much as Miss Winters seems to. She's smart, Samuel observed. Not like Mrs. Peterson, who just knows about cooking and sewing. Mrs. Peterson is a fine woman, Jackson corrected gently. I know, Samuel conceded. But Miss Winters knows about adventures and science and history. Jackson realized with a start that this was the most his son had spoken to him in months. Whatever Willa Winters had done to spark this interest, he couldn't help but be grateful for it. Get some rest, son, he said, rising from the bed. Maybe tomorrow we can look at some maps together. Downstairs, he found Willa sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of tea, a small leather-bound journal open before her. The children are settled, he informed her, feeling strangely awkward in his own home. They're wonderful children, Mr. Wade, Willa said, closing her journal. You must be very proud of them. I am, he said, taking a seat across from her. Though I can't take much credit these days. They've been difficult since their mother passed. He hadn't meant to be so forthright, but something about her calm presence invited confidence. I'm sorry for your loss, she said simply. Children grieve differently than adults. Sometimes they just need someone to acknowledge their pain without trying to fix it. Jackson studied her, wondering what experiences had given her such insight. You seem to have a way with them. Samuel's barely spoken 3 sentences together in months, and tonight he couldn't stop talking. A faint blush colored her cheeks. Children usually respond well when you treat them as people with valid thoughts and feelings, not just as children to be managed. The implied criticism wasn't lost on him. I've done my best, he said stiffly. I didn't mean to suggest otherwise, Willa backtracked. Raising children alone is an enormous challenge. I only meant that sometimes a fresh perspective can help. Jackson nodded, accepting her explanation. How long have you been teaching? Formally? 3 years, she replied. Though I've been tutoring since I was 16. And what brought you to Wyoming territory? He asked. It's a long way from civilization. Something flickered across her face, caution, perhaps. Opportunity, she said after a moment. And a desire for adventure, I suppose. The school board in Clearwater Springs offered a good position with housing included. Adventure, Jackson repeated with a hint of skepticism. Well, you certainly found some today with that stage robbery. Not the kind I was hoping for, she admitted with a wry smile. But life rarely follows our carefully laid plans, does it? No, Jackson agreed, thinking of Emma and the future they'd planned together. It doesn't. An understanding passed between them then, a mutual recognition of hard-earned wisdom. I should let you rest, Jackson said, rising from his chair. You've had quite a day. Thank you again for your hospitality, Mr. Wade, Willa said. I truly appreciate it. Jackson, he found himself saying. Mr. Wade makes me feel like my father. Her smile widened slightly. Good night then, Jackson. Good night, Miss Winters. Willa, she corrected. If I'm to call you Jackson. Good night, Willa, he amended. And for the first time in longer than he could remember, Jackson felt the faintest stirring of something that might, someday, become hope. The following morning, Jackson woke to the unfamiliar sound of laughter drifting up from the kitchen. He dressed quickly and made his way downstairs to find Willa at the stove, teaching Lily how to flip pancakes while Samuel set the table. "Look, Papa," Lily exclaimed when she spotted him. "I'm cooking." "I see that," Jackson said, taking in the scene with amazement. Flour dusted Lily's nose and cheeks, but her smile was brighter than he'd seen in years. "Miss Winters says I'm a natural," Lily announced proudly. "She certainly is," Willa confirmed, her own face softened with amusement. "Good morning, Jackson. I hope you don't mind us starting breakfast. The children were up early, and I thought we might surprise you." "I don't mind," he said, watching as Samuel carefully placed forks beside each plate, his usual scowl replaced by concentration. Mrs. Peterson arrived just as they were sitting down to eat, her eyebrows rising at the domestic scene before her. "Well now," she said, removing her shawl. "Isn't this a picture?" "Miss Winters taught Lily to make pancakes," Samuel informed her importantly. "And they're not even burned." "Is that so?" Mrs. Peterson exchanged a look with Jackson that he couldn't quite decipher. "Then I suppose my services aren't needed this morning." "Nonsense," Willa said quickly. "We've only just begun the day. Besides, I understand you're taking the children into town later to get supplies." "That was the plan," Mrs. Peterson confirmed, hanging her shawl on a peg by the door. "Unless you'd prefer to join us, Miss Winters. I'm sure the children would enjoy your company." Before Willa could respond, Jackson interjected. "Actually, I thought Miss Winters might like to see the ranch today. She mentioned wanting to learn more about the area for her teaching." Willa glanced at him in surprise. "That would be lovely, but I wouldn't want to keep you from your work." "Ben can handle things for a morning," Jackson said, surprising himself with the offer. He hadn't taken a morning off in years, but something compelled him to show Willa the land that had become his sanctuary and prison. "Then I accept," Willa said with a smile that reached her eyes. "Thank you." After breakfast, Mrs. Peterson took the children to town with promises of candy if they behaved, leaving Jackson and Willa alone at the ranch. "I should change into something more suitable for riding," Willa said, gesturing to her dress. "Of course," Jackson nodded. "Take your time." When she reappeared 20 minutes later, Jackson had to remind himself not to stare. She wore a divided riding skirt of practical brown wool, with a simple white blouse clothing that suggested this wasn't her first time on horseback. "Will this do?" she asked, apparently misinterpreting his silence. "Yes," he cleared his throat. "I've saddled a horse for you. Thunder's old partner, Daisy. She's gentle but sure-footed." Willa approached the dappled mare with confidence, stroking her nose and murmuring softly. "She's beautiful," she said appreciatively. "You have excellent horses." "They're the backbone of any ranch," Jackson agreed, watching as she checked the saddle and bridle with practiced ease. "You've ridden before." It wasn't a question, but Willa answered anyway. "My father believed all proper educations should include horsemanship. He was rather progressive in his views on what young ladies should learn." She mounted smoothly, gathering the reins as she settled into the saddle. "Shall we?" They rode at an easy pace, Jackson pointing out boundaries and landmarks as they went. The morning was clear and cool, with a breeze that carried the scent of sage and wildflowers across the rolling plains. "It's beautiful here," Willow observed as they paused atop a rise that overlooked the valley. "So open and free." "That's what drew us here," Jackson said without thinking. "Emma, my wife, she loved the vastness of it. Said it made her feel like anything was possible." Willa turned to look at him, her expression gentle. "She sounds like a remarkable woman." She was, Jackson agreed, the familiar ache in his chest present, but somehow less sharp in the sharing. "We came out from Missouri in '68, just after we married. Built the ranch from nothing but dreams and hard work." "The children mentioned she passed 3 years ago," Willa said carefully. "Was it illness?" Jackson's hands tightened on the reins. "Childbirth," he said shortly. "Our third child. Neither survived." Willa's face filled with compassion. "I'm so sorry, Jackson. That's a terrible loss." "It was a long time ago," he said, the lie automatic after years of deflecting sympathy. "Grief doesn't operate on a timetable," Willa observed quietly. My mother used to say time doesn't heal wounds so much as teach us to carry them differently. Jackson looked at her sharply. Your mother sounds wise. She was, Willa smiled sadly. I lost her when I was 16. Influenza. And your father? Jackson asked, recognizing a kindred spirit in loss. Gone 2 years later, Willa replied. A logging accident. I finished raising my younger brother afterward. Jackson felt a new respect for her resilience. That couldn't have been easy. It wasn't, she admitted. But we managed. Thomas is at university now, studying medicine. I'm very proud of him. They continued writing, the conversation flowing more easily as they shared stories of their lives. Jackson found himself speaking of things he hadn't discussed in years: his hopes for the ranch, his concerns for his children, even funny anecdotes from his early days as a cattleman. Emma would have loved this spot, he said as they dismounted by a small pond surrounded by cottonwoods. She used to bring the children here for picnics in the summer. I can see why, Willa said, taking in the tranquil scene. It feels magical somehow. They sat in companionable silence for a while, watching dragonflies skimming the water's surface. Jackson stole glances at Willa's profile, struck by how comfortable he felt in her presence. There was something refreshingly straightforward about her, a lack of pretense that put him at ease. Why teaching? He asked suddenly. You're clearly educated enough for other pursuits. Willa considered the question. I believe education is the greatest gift we can give children, especially here in the West where opportunities can be limited. Knowledge opens doors that might otherwise remain closed. Her passion was evident in her voice, her eyes brightening as she spoke. Besides, there's something wonderful about watching a child discover their own capabilities. That moment when they realize they can read on their own or solve a difficult problem, it's like witnessing a small miracle. Jackson thought of Samuel's eager questions the night before and Lily's proud smile as she flipped pancakes that morning. I think I understand, he said. They seemed different last night. More alive somehow. Children respond to genuine interest, Willa said. They know when adults truly see them versus when they're simply being tolerated. The observation wasn't accusatory, but Jackson felt its truth like a physical weight. How long had he been merely tolerating his children's presence, going through the motions of fatherhood without truly engaging? I haven't been much of a father these past years, he admitted, the words painful but necessary. After Emma died, it was all I could do to keep the ranch running and food on the table. You did what you had to do to survive, Willa said gently. There's no shame in that. But perhaps now it's time to do more than survive. Their eyes met, and Jackson felt something shift inside him like a door long rusted shut being carefully eased open. Perhaps it is, he agreed softly. The sound of approaching hoofbeats broke the moment. They turned to see Ben riding toward them at a gallop, his expression urgent. Boss, he called as he drew near. There's trouble in town. The Delaney gang was spotted heading this way. Sheriff's gathering men to form a posse. Jackson stood immediately, helping Willa to her feet. How many? 6, maybe 7 riders, Ben reported. They hit the bank in Patterson yesterday. Sheriff thinks they might try Clearwater Springs next. A cold fear gripped Jackson's heart. The children are in town with Mrs. Peterson. I know, Ben nodded grimly. Mayor's gathering everyone at the schoolhouse for safety. Mrs. Peterson and the kids should already be there. We need to go, Jackson said, turning to Willa. It's not safe for you here alone either. They mounted quickly, pushing their horses to a gallop as they headed for town. Jackson's mind raced with worry for Samuel and Lily. If anything happened to them, they'll be safe, Willa assured him, seeming to read his thoughts as they rode side by side. The town will protect them. The Delaney gang doesn't care who gets hurt, Jackson replied grimly. They've killed women and children before. The 10-mile ride to town seemed endless, but finally the buildings of Clearwater Springs came into view. The streets were eerily empty as they rode in, businesses closed with their shutters drawn. The schoolhouse is at the end of Main Street, Jackson told Willa as they slowed their horses to a walk. Mayor must have gotten word out quickly. As they approached the white clapboard building, Jackson saw armed men positioned around its perimeter. Sheriff Taylor stepped forward to meet them. Wade, he nodded in greeting. Glad you're here. We could use another gun if it comes to that. My children, Jackson asked immediately. Inside with the others, the sheriff assured him. Mrs. Peterson's keeping them occupied. Miss Winters, it's good to see you unharmed after yesterday's trouble. Thank you, Sheriff, Willa replied. Has there been any sign of the gang? Not yet, Taylor said, his weathered face grim. But my deputies spotted them camped about 5 miles out. They'll likely make their move soon. Let me get Willow inside, then I'll come back to help, Jackson said, dismounting and helping Willa down from her horse. The schoolhouse was crowded with women, children, and elderly townspeople. Jackson spotted Mrs. Peterson immediately, surrounded by a group of children including Samuel and Lily. "Papa!" Lily cried, breaking away to run to him. He swept her up into his arms, holding her tightly. "Are you all right?" he asked, looking over her head to where Samuel stood watching them. "We're fine," Samuel answered, moving closer. "Mrs. Peterson says we have to stay here until the bad men are gone." "That's right," Jackson confirmed, reaching out to pull his son into a one-armed embrace. "I need you both to be brave and do exactly what Mrs. Peterson and Miss Winters tell you, understand?" Both children nodded solemnly. "You're going back out there, aren't you?" Samuel asked, his voice small but steady. Jackson knelt down to look his son in the eye. "I have to help protect the town, Sam. That's what men do. We protect what matters." Samuel straightened his shoulders. "I'll protect Lily and Miss Winters, then." "I know you will," Jackson said, feeling a surge of pride. "You're becoming a fine young man." He stood and turned to Willa, who had been watching the exchange with warm eyes. "Stay inside," he instructed. "No matter what you hear. Be careful, Jackson," she said, her hand briefly touching his arm. These children need their father to come back to them. The simple truth of her words steadied him. "I will," he promised. Outside, he joined the sheriff and other men planning their defense. The bank would be the likely target, so they positioned shooters in buildings with sightlines to it. Jackson took a position in the general store, rifle ready as they waited. The gang arrived just before noon, 6 riders moving boldly down the center of Main Street. Jackson recognized Eli Delaney from wanted posters, a tall man with a distinctive scar across his cheek, riding a black stallion at the head of the group. "Looks mighty quiet for a Tuesday," Delaney called out, his voice carrying in the still air. "Anybody home?" The sheriff stepped out from the shadows of the jail. "That's far enough, Delaney." The outlaw leader reined in his horse, his men following suit. His hand hovered near his gun as he surveyed the empty street. "Sheriff Taylor," Delaney acknowledged with a mocking tip of his hat. "Seems you've been expecting us." "Word travels," Taylor replied evenly. "There's nothing for you here, Delaney. Best move on." Delaney's laugh was cold. "Now why would I do that when I hear you've got a nice fat payroll sitting in that bank for the railroad workers?" Jackson tensed, his finger resting lightly against the trigger of his rifle. He had a clear shot if needed. "That payroll left on the morning stage," Taylor lied smoothly. "You're too late." One of Delaney's men leaned over to whisper something, and the leader's expression darkened. "Funny thing about that," he said. "My boys checked the schedule. No stage left this morning. Special run." Taylor shrugged. "Railroad requested it." The tension in the street was palpable as Delaney considered this. Jackson could see the man weighing his options whether to believe the sheriff or risk a fight. Finally, Delaney's hand moved to his gun. "I think you're lying, Sheriff." What happened next unfolded in seconds. Delaney drew, but Taylor was faster. The sheriff's shot caught the outlaw in the shoulder, spinning him in his saddle. Gunfire erupted from all directions as the hidden defenders opened fire. Jackson's first shot took down a rider at the back of the group. His second missed as the remaining gang members scattered, seeking cover. 2 fell before they reached shelter, but Delaney and 2 others managed to barricade themselves in the blacksmith shop. They're pinned down, been called from his position across the street. But they've got hostages, the blacksmith and his apprentice. The standoff continued for hours, with occasional exchanges of gunfire, but no clear resolution. As dusk approached, Jackson grew increasingly concerned about the children waiting in the schoolhouse. "We need to end this," he told the sheriff, "before it gets dark." Taylor nodded grimly. "I've got men circling around back. If we can create a distraction from the front, they might be able to get in through the rear window." "I'll provide the distraction," Jackson volunteered. "Just make sure your men are ready." Before the sheriff could protest, Jackson moved to a position with a clear view of the blacksmith shop. He took careful aim at the lantern hanging just inside the doorway and fired. The lamp exploded in a shower of glass and kerosene, igniting hay stored nearby. Smoke billowed from the shop as the outlaws were forced to choose between surrendering or burning. Delaney emerged first, using the blacksmith as a shield. "Back off, or he dies," he shouted, pressing a gun to the man's head. From his position, Jackson couldn't risk a shot without endangering the hostage. But as Delaney backed toward the horses tied at the side of the building, one of the sheriff's men fired from the roof of a nearby store. The bullet caught Delaney in the leg, causing him to stumble. The blacksmith seized the opportunity to break free, diving to the ground as more shots rang out. When the smoke cleared, Delaney lay motionless in the dirt, and his remaining men had thrown down their weapons in surrender. "It's over," Taylor announced, moving to secure the prisoners. "Good shot, Wade." Jackson lowered his rifle, the tension draining from his body. "The hostages?" "Shaken but alive," the sheriff confirmed. "Go on back to your family. We'll handle things here." The word family echoed in Jackson's mind as he made his way to the schoolhouse. It had been so long since he'd thought of himself as part of a family rather than simply a widower with responsibilities. As he approached, the door opened and Lily burst out, running to him with Samuel close behind. He dropped to his knees, gathering them both in his arms. "You're safe," Lily whispered against his neck. "I prayed you would be." "Miss Winters prayed with us," Samuel added. "She said God listens extra hard to children's prayers." Jackson looked up to see Willa standing in the doorway, watching their reunion with a soft smile. Something shifted in his chest at the sight of her, a warmth he'd thought long extinguished. "Thank you," he said as he approached her, children still clinging to his sides. "For looking after them." "They were very brave," Willa replied. "Just like their father." The ride home was subdued, everyone exhausted from the day's events. Mrs. Peterson had opted to stay with her sister in town, leaving Jackson alone with Willa and the children. After a simple dinner, Jackson sat on the porch while Willa put the children to bed. The events of the day had shaken him more than he cared to admit. The possibility of leaving his children orphaned had always haunted him, but today it had been a near reality. "They're asleep," Willa said softly as she joined him on the porch. "Lily wanted me to tell you she's proud of you for being a hero." Jackson shook his head. "I'm no hero. Just a man trying to protect what matters." "That's what heroes are," Willa countered, settling into the chair beside him. "Ordinary people doing what needs to be done despite their fear." They sat in companionable silence for a while, watching as stars appeared in the darkening sky. "The sheriff stopped by the schoolhouse before we left," Willa said eventually. "He mentioned that with the Delaney gang captured, it's safe for me to move into the teacher's cottage now." Jackson felt an unexpected pang at the thought of her leaving. "That's good news," he said, not meaning it. "Yes," Willa agreed, though she didn't sound convinced. "I should be ready to start teaching next week as planned." "The children will be disappointed," Jackson found himself saying. "They've grown quite attached to you in a short time." "And I to them," Willa admitted. "They're wonderful children, Jackson. Smart and kind and resilient." "Like their mother," he said automatically. "And their father," Willa added firmly. Jackson turned to look at her, struck again by her directness. "You hardly know me." "I know enough," she replied simply. "I've seen how you look at your children, even when you think no one is watching. There's such love there, Jackson, even if you've forgotten how to show it." Her words pierced the armor he'd built around his heart. "I don't know how to be what they need," he confessed. "Emma was the one who knew how to comfort them, how to make them laugh. I just knew how to work and provide." "You're selling yourself short," Willa said gently. "Today, when Samuel promised to protect Lily and me, that was your influence. When Lily prayed for your safety, that faith came from somewhere. You've given them more than you realize." Jackson swallowed hard against the emotion rising in his throat. "Maybe," he conceded, "but it's not enough." "Then give them more," Willa challenged. "It's not too late to be the father they need." The simplicity of her advice struck him. Not too late. Those words held more hope than he'd allowed himself in years. "Will you help me?" he asked, the request surprising them both. "I mean, as their teacher. Help me understand how to reach them better." Willa's smile was luminous in the gathering darkness. "I'd be honored," she said, "starting with sending them to school regularly." Jackson laughed, the sound rusty but genuine. "Yes, madam." though I suspect Samuel will be disappointed if his lessons don't include map reading and star navigation. Oh, I believe in a well-rounded education, Willa assured him with a mischievous gleam in her eye. Reading, writing, arithmetic, and the occasional adventure. As they continued talking late into the night, Jackson felt something he'd thought forever lost beginning to stir within him, the possibility of joy. The next few days passed in a blur of activity as Willa prepared to move into the teacher's cottage and begin her official duties. Jackson found himself inventing reasons to go into town, often bringing the children with him to help Willa set up her classroom. "Papa, can we have a desk like this at home?" Lily asked as she ran her hand over the smooth wooden surface of the teacher's desk. "For doing our lessons? I suppose we could arrange something," Jackson replied, watching as Willa organized books on a nearby shelf. "Maybe in the study that we never use." "Really?" Samuel looked up from the globe he was examining. "You mean it?" Jackson nodded, realizing how simple it would be to give his children this small joy. "We'll clear it out this weekend. Make it a proper place for learning." Willa caught his eye over Samuel's head, her approving smile warming him from within. That evening, as they rode back to the ranch, Samuel broke the comfortable silence. "Pa, is Miss Winters going to be our new mama?" The question caught Jackson completely off guard. "What? No, Sam. She's your teacher." "But you like her," Samuel persisted. "I can tell. You smile when she's around. And she likes us," Lily added from her perch in front of Jackson on his horse. "Mrs. Peterson says she's perfect for our family." Jackson made a mental note to have a word with Mrs. Peterson about discussing such matters with his impressionable children. "Miss Winters is a fine woman and a good teacher," he said carefully. "But that doesn't mean she's going to be your new mother. That's not how these things work." "How do they work then?" Samuel asked with the relentless curiosity of youth. Jackson sighed, wishing Emma were here to handle such questions with her usual grace. "It's complicated, son. Adults need time to get to know each other very well before they consider marriage." "You've known her for a whole week," Lily pointed out with impeccable child logic. "That's a long time." Despite himself, Jackson chuckled. "Not in grown-up terms, sweetheart. Besides, Miss Winters might not want to be part of our family. She came here to teach, not to find a husband." "But if she wanted to," Samuel pressed, "would you want her to be?" The question hung in the air between them, demanding an honesty Jackson wasn't sure he was ready to give. "I think that's enough questions for now," he finally said. "Let's get home before dark." The children subsided, but Jackson could tell by their exchanged glances that the subject wasn't closed in their minds. The thought both unsettled and intrigued him. Was he ready to even consider such a possibility? And more importantly, would a woman like Willa ever consider binding herself to a widower with 2 children and a heart that had been closed for years? The next morning, Jackson drove the wagon into town to help Willa move the last of her belongings to the teacher's cottage. The small house beside the schoolhouse had been freshly painted and furnished with basic necessities by the town council. "It's quite lovely," Willa said as they carried in her trunk. "Much nicer than I expected. Mayor Jenkins mentioned they fixed it up special," Jackson informed her. "Seems they're determined to keep you here long term." "That's flattering," Willa replied, looking around the cozy front room. "Though I admit it will be quiet after the liveliness of your home." Jackson set down the trunk and straightened, aware of how empty his own house would feel without her presence. "You're welcome to visit any time," he offered. "The children would like that." "Just the children?" Willa asked with uncharacteristic hesitation. Their eyes met, and Jackson felt his heartbeat quicken. "No," he admitted softly. "Not just the children." A blush colored her cheeks as she busied herself unpacking books onto a small shelf. "I've enjoyed my time with your family very much, Jackson. More than I expected to. Even with stage robberies and outlaw gangs," he teased, trying to lighten the suddenly charged atmosphere. "Even with those," she laughed. "Though I hope such excitements are behind us now. Clearwater Springs is usually quite peaceful," he assured her. "Most excitement we get is the occasional cattle stampede or Mrs. Henderson's prize pig getting loose." Willa's laugh was interrupted by a knock at the open door. They turned to see the mayor standing there, hat in hand. "Miss Winters, Mr. Wade." Jenkins greeted them with a nod. "Just stopped by to make sure everything is satisfactory with the cottage." "It's wonderful, Mayor Jenkins," Willa assured him. "The town has been most generous." Least we could do for our new teacher, the mayor beamed. Especially after your troublesome arrival. Which reminds me, he turned to Jackson. Sheriff asked me to let you know they're transporting the Delaney gang to Cheyenne tomorrow for trial. Wanted to thank you again for your help. Just did what anyone would. Jackson demurred. Not anyone. Jenkins contradicted. Takes courage to stand up to men like that. He turned back to Willa. You're in good hands with folks like Wade here looking out for the town. Speaking of which, the school board is meeting tonight if you'd like to attend, Miss Winters. Get acquainted with the curriculum expectations and such. I'd be delighted, Willa replied. After the mayor left, Jackson helped Willa arrange her furniture and unpack her remaining belongings. It was easy, domestic work that felt surprisingly natural. You know, Willa said as they finished, I never thank you properly for taking me in after the stage robbery. It was extraordinarily kind, especially given your circumstances. Jackson shrugged off her gratitude. Anyone would have done the same. No, Willa shook her head. Not everyone would open their home to a stranger, especially not a widower with young children. It speaks to your character, Jackson. Her sincerity made him uncomfortable. It was the right thing to do. Yes, she agreed with a small smile. That's my point exactly. As he prepared to leave, Jackson found himself reluctant to go. Would you, he started, then hesitated. That is, if you're not too busy with school preparations, would you consider joining us for Sunday dinner tomorrow? After church. Willa's face brightened. I'd like that very much. Good. Jackson nodded, relief flooding through him. The children will be pleased. And you? Willa asked, her voice soft. Jackson met her gaze steadily. Yes, he said simply. I will be too. The weeks that followed fell into a pleasant rhythm. Samuel and Lily began attending school regularly, coming home full of stories about Miss Winters' teaching methods and the new friends they were making. Jackson found himself reorganizing ranch work to be home when they returned, eager to hear about their day. Willa became a frequent visitor to the ranch, joining them for Sunday dinners that gradually extended to include Friday evenings as well. Mrs. Peterson watched this development with barely concealed delight, often finding excuses to leave early so that Willa and Jackson could have time alone. You're not being subtle, Jackson told the older woman one afternoon as she prepared to depart, leaving a freshly baked pie that needs eating while it's warm. Not trying to be, Mr. Wade, she replied cheerfully. Some things don't need subtlety, just a little nudge in the right direction. As autumn painted the landscape in golds and reds, Jackson found himself looking forward to each day in a way he hadn't since Emma's death. The ranch prospered, the children thrived, and Willa became an increasingly vital part of their lives. It was Samuel who first pointed out the change in his father. You laugh more now, Pa, he observed one evening as they sat by the fire, Jackson reading aloud from a book Willa had recommended. Like you used to when Mama was here. Jackson paused, the book open in his hands. Do I? Samuel nodded solemnly. It's good. Lily doesn't remember you laughing before, but I do. The simple observation hit Jackson like a physical blow. Had his grief been so all-consuming that his daughter had never known him to laugh? I'm sorry, Sam, he said, his voice rough with emotion. I've not been the father you and Lily deserve these past years. Samuel moved from his spot on the floor to sit beside Jackson on the sofa. It's all right. Pa Miss Winters says people heal in their own time, like how different plants grow at different speeds. Jackson smiled at that. She's a wise woman, your Miss Winters. She makes you happy, Samuel stated with a child's directness. Doesn't she? Yes, Jackson admitted, seeing no reason to lie to his perceptive son. She does. Then you should marry her, Samuel said decisively. Before someone else does. Billy Thompson says his pa thinks she's the prettiest lady in the county. Jackson coughed to hide his surprise. Marriage is a serious decision, Sam. It's not just about thinking someone is pretty. But you love her, Samuel insisted. I can tell. And she loves us, me and Lily. Probably you too. The confidence with which his son made these pronouncements left Jackson speechless. Was his growing attachment to Willa so obvious that even a 7-year-old could see it? It's complicated, Jackson finally managed. Samuel sighed with exaggerated patience. Grown UPS always say that when they're scared to do something. Is that what Miss Winters teaches you? Jackson asked, half amused, half defensive. No, Samuel replied. That's what Mama used to say, remember? When you were afraid to buy that new bull because he cost so much? The memory surfaced suddenly, Emma teasing him about his caution, encouraging him to take the risk that had ultimately improved their herd significantly. How had he forgotten that? I remember, Jackson said softly. Mama would like Miss Winters, Samuel added with certainty. She'd want you to be happy again. With that profound statement, Samuel returned to his spot on the floor, leaving Jackson to wonder when his son had become so wise. That Sunday, as Willa joined them for dinner after church, Jackson found himself watching her with new awareness. The way she helped Lily set the table, laughing at something his daughter whispered to her. The patient manner in which she discussed a history question with Samuel. The warmth in her eyes when she caught Jackson observing her. After dinner, while the children played in the yard, Jackson and Willa sat on the porch swing, enjoying the crisp autumn air. Samuel's teacher tells me he's showing remarkable improvement, Willa said, a teasing lilt to her voice. Apparently he's quite gifted in mathematics. Is that so? Jackson played along. And what does Lily's teacher say about her? Oh, she's a natural with stories, Willa replied. Her compositions are quite imaginative, though her spelling needs work. They seem happy, Jackson observed. Happier than I've seen them in years. Willa nodded, her shoulder brushing against his as the swing moved gently. Children are resilient when given the chance. They've been waiting for permission to be happy again. Permission? Jackson questioned. Sometimes children think they're betraying a lost parent by being happy, Willa explained. They need to know it's all right to laugh and play and look forward rather than back. Jackson considered this. And what about their father? Does he need permission too? Willa turned to look at him directly, her expression serious. Do you think you do? The question hung between them, loaded with meaning. Jackson took a deep breath, gathering courage. Maybe I did, he admitted. Maybe I've been waiting for a sign that it's all right to live again, to feel again. And have you found that sign? Willa asked softly. Jackson reached for her hand, his calloused fingers entwining with hers. I think I have, he said, in my children's laughter. In the way the ranch feels like a home again instead of just a place to work. In you. Willa's fingers tightened around his. Jackson, I know it's only been a few months, he continued, needing to say what had been building in his heart. And I'm not asking for anything now, but I want you to know that meeting you has changed things for me, for all of us. You brought light back into our lives when I thought the darkness was permanent. Tears glistened in Willa's eyes. Your family has come to mean a great deal to me too, Jackson. More than I ever expected when I came here. Just the family? He asked, echoing her question from weeks before. A smile bloomed on her face. No, she whispered. Not just the family. Their first kiss was gentle, tentative, the careful exploration of two people who had known loss and understood the preciousness of new beginnings. When they parted, Jackson rested his forehead against hers, a sense of peace settling over him that he'd thought forever beyond his reach. Miss Winters. Lily's voice broke the moment as she ran up the porch steps. Look what I found. A butterfly with orange wings. Willa turned to the little girl with genuine interest, examining the insect that had landed on a stick Lily held carefully. That's a monarch, she explained. They're very special butterflies. They travel thousands of miles every year. Like you did to come here? Lily asked. Yes, Willa smiled. Like I did. I'm glad you didn't keep flying, Lily said seriously. I'm glad you stayed. So am I, sweetheart, Willa replied, her eyes meeting Jackson's over the child's head. So am I. As autumn deepened into winter, the relationship between Jackson and Willa blossomed despite the challenges of frontier life. Heavy snows often made the road between town and the ranch impassable, leading to creative solutions. Jackson would ride into town with supplies for the school, and Willa would send letters and small gifts back with him for the children. The town noticed their courtship, of course. Clearwater Springs was too small for secrets, especially when the new schoolteacher and the widowed rancher were seen together at church socials, town meetings, and holiday celebrations. You're the talk of the town, Ben informed Jackson one snowy December day as they mended tack in the barn. Mrs. Henderson has already planned what quilt pattern she'll make for your wedding gift. Jackson shook his head, embarrassed but not displeased. People are getting ahead of themselves. Are they? Ben raised an eyebrow. You've been smitten with that lady since she showed up half dead from that stage robbery. Don't think I haven't noticed how you find reasons to go to town twice as often as before. It's complicated, Jackson muttered, echoing the words he'd used with Samuel. Ben snorted. Only because you're making it so. She's sweet on you. You're sweet on her. The kids adore her. Seems simple enough to me. Emma's only been gone 3 years, Jackson said, voicing the concern that still nagged at him despite his growing feelings for Willa. Ben's expression softened. Emma was my friend too, you know? And I reckon if she could see how Miss Winters has brought life back to you and those kids, she'd be the first to give her blessing. Jackson considered this as he worked, the familiar motions of repairing leather straps soothing in their repetition. I don't want to rush things, he said finally. Willa deserves to be sure. So do the children. Fair enough, Ben conceded. But don't wait too long. Good women are scarce out here. And that one's special. The wisdom of Ben's advice became apparent 2 weeks later at the town's Christmas celebration. Jackson and the children had gone into town despite threatening weather, unwilling to miss the event that Willa had helped organize at the schoolhouse. The building had been transformed with evergreen boughs, red ribbons, and candles. Children performed recitations and songs they'd practiced for weeks, with Lily proudly delivering a perfect rendition of "'Twas the Night Before Christmas" that brought tears to Jackson's eyes. After the performances, as refreshments were being served and gifts exchanged, Jackson noticed several men, including the widowed banker Mr. Harrison, engaging Willa in conversation. She was gracious to all, but Jackson couldn't help the flare of jealousy when Harrison presented her with an expensive-looking leather-bound book. Looks like you've got competition, Mrs. Peterson observed, appearing at his side with uncanny timing. Harrison's been calling on Miss Winters regularly, bringing fancy treats for her students and offering to escort her to events. Has he? Jackson asked, trying to sound unconcerned. Mrs. Peterson nodded sagely. And he's not the only one. That new doctor from back east seems quite taken with her too. Jackson frowned, watching as Willa laughed at something Harrison said. She's free to receive callers, he said stiffly. We have no formal understanding. Mrs. Peterson gave him a look that made him feel like a schoolboy caught in mischief. And whose fault is that, Mr. Wade? A woman like that won't wait forever while you make up your mind. Before Jackson could respond, Lily ran up to them, her face flushed with excitement. Papa, Miss Winters says we can take the gifts from under the tree now. Come see what I got. The rest of the evening passed pleasantly enough, though Jackson couldn't shake his discomfort at seeing Willa surrounded by admiring townspeople, particularly the male ones. She caught his eye several times across the room, her smile warming him despite his unsettled feelings. As the celebration wound down, snow began falling heavily, prompting families to depart quickly for home before the roads became impassable. You should stay in town tonight, Willa suggested as Jackson helped her extinguish candles and tidy the schoolroom. The children are exhausted, and that storm looks serious. We'll make it, Jackson assured her, though he was less confident than he sounded. The horses know the way even in the dark. Willa frowned, concern evident in her expression. At least let me pack some extra blankets for the wagon. And promise you'll turn back if it gets too bad. I promise, he said, touched by her worry. As they finished cleaning, they found themselves alone in the schoolroom, the children having gone with Mrs. Peterson to help load leftover food into wagons. Thank you for coming tonight, Willa said, moving closer to him. It meant a lot to have you and the children here. We wouldn't have missed it, Jackson replied. Lily's been practicing that poem for weeks. She was perfect, Willa smiled. They both looked so happy tonight. They are happy, Jackson said. Happier than I thought possible after. Well, after everything. Willa nodded, understanding in her eyes. Children are remarkable that way. They teach us how to live in the present rather than dwelling in the past. Or worrying about the future, Jackson added, thinking of his earlier jealousy and Mrs. Peterson's warning. Is something troubling you, Jackson? Willa asked perceptively. You seemed distant earlier. He hesitated, unsure how to express his feelings without sounding possessive or presumptuous. I noticed you have many admirers in town, he finally said. Mr. Harrison seems particularly attentive. Willa's expression softened with amusement. Albert Harrison is kind, but his interest is primarily in improving the school. He's been generous with donations of books and supplies. And the doctor? Jackson couldn't help asking. Dr. Miller? Willa laughed outright. He's engaged to a woman in Denver. He'll be leaving in the spring to bring her back as his bride. Relief flooded through Jackson, followed by embarrassment at his transparency. I see. Do you? Willa asked, stepping closer until they were mere inches apart. Because I'm beginning to wonder if I've misinterpreted certain things between us. You haven't, Jackson assured her quickly. I don't want to rush you or pressure you in any way. Jackson Wade, Willa said with fond exasperation. For a man so decisive in every other aspect of his life, you can be remarkably hesitant in matters of the heart. Before he could respond, she rose on tiptoe and pressed her lips to his in a kiss that left no doubt about her feelings. Jackson's arms encircled her waist, drawing her closer as he deepened the kiss, pouring months of growing affection and desire into the embrace. When they finally parted, both breathless, Jackson rested his forehead against hers. I love you, he said simply, the words he'd been holding back for weeks finally finding voice. I think I have since that first day on the ranch when you made my children laugh again. I love you too, Willa whispered. You and Samuel and Lily. I never expected to find a family when I came west, but somehow I found exactly what I needed without knowing I was looking for it. The sound of the schoolhouse door opening broke them apart as Samuel entered, stomping snow from his boots. Pa, Mrs. Peterson says the storm's getting worse. We should go now if we're going to make it home. His eyes moved between them curiously, taking in their flushed faces and close proximity. We're coming, son, Jackson said, reluctantly stepping away from Willa. Go tell Mrs. Peterson we'll be right there. After Samuel left, Jackson turned back to Willa. This conversation isn't finished, he promised. I should hope not, she replied with a smile that warmed him more effectively than any fire could. The ride home was treacherous, with snow falling so thickly that Jackson could barely see the road ahead. The children huddled under blankets in the wagon while he focused on keeping the horses steady. Pa, Samuel's voice came from beneath the mound of blankets. Are you going to marry Miss Winters? Despite the tension of navigating through the storm, Jackson smiled at his son's directness. I'd like to, he admitted. Would that be all right with you and Lily? Yes. Lily's enthusiastic response was immediate. Does that mean she'll live with us and be our new mama? If she says yes, Jackson cautioned. And if she does, she wouldn't be replacing your mother, Lily. No one could ever do that. She would be an addition to our family. I know, Lily said with surprising wisdom. Mama's in heaven. Miss Winters is here with us. We can love them both, right? That's right, sweetheart, Jackson confirmed, his throat tight with emotion. We can love them both. When are you going to ask her? Samuel wanted to know. Soon, Jackson promised. Very soon. The opportunity came sooner than he expected. The blizzard that began Christmas night continued for 3 days, dropping so much snow that Clearwater Springs was effectively isolated. When the weather finally cleared, Jackson's first concern was checking on Willa. He rode into town alone, leaving the children with Mrs. Peterson. The main street was buried under drifts that reached the storefronts in places, with townspeople working together to clear paths between buildings. Jackson found Willa at the teacher's cottage, attempting to shovel a path to her front door. She looked up at his approach, her face lighting with a smile that made the frigid temperature seem inconsequential. Jackson, she called, leaning on her shovel. I was worried about you and the children. We're fine, he assured her, dismounting to take the shovel from her hands. The ranch is well stocked for winter. I was more concerned about you. I'm perfectly all right, she said. The town has been very attentive. Mr. Jenkins checks on me twice daily, and Mrs. Miller from the general store insists on bringing me meals. Jackson nodded, relieved. Still, that's a lot of snow for one schoolteacher to clear alone. I'm stronger than I look, Willa reminded him with a teasing smile. But I won't refuse your help. They worked together to clear the path, then moved inside the cottage where Willa prepared hot coffee. The small house was cozy and warm, with books lining every available surface and student papers neatly stacked on a small desk. It feels like you, Jackson observed, looking around. Organized, but welcoming. High praise from a man whose barn is arranged with military precision, Willa laughed, handing him a steaming cup. They settled by the fire, talking about the storm and its aftermath, the children's excitement over their Christmas gifts, and plans for the coming year. It was easy, comfortable conversation, the kind that made Jackson feel as if they'd known each other much longer than a few months. "I've been thinking," he said finally, setting down his empty cup, "about what you said at the Christmas celebration, about me being hesitant in matters of the heart." Willa's expression grew serious as she met his gaze. "I shouldn't have said that. Everyone moves at their own pace, Jackson. There's no timetable for healing." "No," he agreed. "But there comes a point when caution becomes cowardice. When protecting yourself from possible pain means missing out on certain joy." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small box that had once belonged to his mother. "I've been carrying this around for weeks, waiting for the perfect moment. Then I realized there is no perfect moment, just perfect certainty." Willa's eyes widened as he opened the box to reveal a simple gold ring with a small pearl. "It was my grandmother's," he explained. "Not fancy, but solid. Like the life I'm offering you." He took a deep breath. "Willa Winters, I love you. My children love you. Would you do us the honor of becoming part of our family as my wife and their mother?" Tears filled Willa's eyes as she looked from the ring to his face. "Yes," she whispered. "With all my heart, yes." The ring fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her hand. As Jackson pulled her into his arms, he felt the last lingering shadows of grief give way to the brightness of new beginnings. "The children will be overjoyed," he murmured against her hair, though not surprised. "They've been campaigning for this outcome for months." Willa laughed, the sound muffled against his chest. "Clever children, taking after their father. And soon their mother," Jackson added, delighting in the way she beamed at the word. They were married in early spring, when the snow had melted and the first wildflowers carpeted the meadows around Clearwater Springs. The entire town turned out for the celebration, which combined the wedding with a school picnic organized by Willa's students. Samuel stood proudly beside his father during the ceremony, holding the rings on a small cushion Lily had embroidered herself. Lily scattered flower petals along the path as Willa walked toward them, radiant in a dress of pale blue silk that complemented her honey-colored hair. "Dearly beloved," the minister began, his voice carrying across the churchyard where chairs had been arranged for the occasion. "We are gathered here today to witness the union of two souls who have found in each other the healing power of love." Jackson could scarcely focus on the words being spoken, so entranced was he by the woman before him. Willa's eyes held his, filled with the same wonder and gratitude he felt at this second chance at happiness. When it came time for their vows, Jackson spoke from the heart. "Willa, you came into our lives when we were lost in darkness, bringing light and laughter back to our home. You taught me that love isn't a limited resource, that opening my heart again doesn't diminish what came before, but honors it by moving forward with courage and hope. I promise to cherish you, support you, and walk beside you through whatever life brings us, for all the days we're given." Tears glistened in Willa's eyes as she responded. "Jackson, when I came west seeking adventure and purpose, I never imagined finding a love so deep and a family so precious. You and your children have shown me what it means to belong somewhere completely. I promise to love you faithfully, to nurture Samuel and Lily as my own, and to build with you a home filled with joy and laughter for all the years to come." As they exchanged rings, Lily whispered loudly enough for the front rows to hear, "Now we're really a family." Laughter rippled through the gathering, and Jackson felt his heart might burst with happiness as he looked from his daughter's beaming face to his son's proud smile, and finally to his bride's loving gaze. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the minister declared. "What God has joined together, let no man put asunder." The celebration that followed lasted well into the evening, with food and dancing and speeches from well-wishers. Mrs. Peterson cried openly as she embraced them both, declaring she'd known from the start they were meant for each other. "Just needed a little nudge," she sniffed, dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief. As the sun began to set, casting golden light across the festivities, Jackson found a moment alone with his new wife. "Happy, Mrs. Wade?" he asked, drawing her close. "Completely," Willa affirmed, resting her head against his shoulder as they watched Samuel teaching Lily a dance step he'd learned from one of the older boys. "Look at them, Jackson. They're blooming." It was true. The withdrawn, somber children of a few months ago had been transformed. Samuel's serious nature remained, but it was now balanced by curiosity and enthusiasm. Lily's natural exuberance, once muted by grief, now shone through in everything she did. "Because of you," Jackson said, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Because of us," Willa corrected gently. "We've all helped each other heal." Mayor Jenkins approached them then, clearing his throat. "Hate to interrupt, but there's a matter that needs discussing before you two ride off into the sunset." "What's that, Mayor?" Jackson asked. "Well, now that our schoolteacher is becoming a rancher's wife, the town council is concerned about the coming school year. We were hoping Mrs. Wade might continue teaching, at least until we can find a replacement." Willa and Jackson exchanged glances, having already discussed this very issue. "Actually, Mayor," Willa said, "I'd like to continue teaching indefinitely, if the council agrees. The ranch is close enough that I can ride in daily, and I believe educating the next generation is too important to set aside." The mayor's face brightened. "That's wonderful news. The children would be devastated to lose you, and frankly, you're the best teacher this town has ever had." After he bustled away to share the news with the council members, Jackson pulled Willa closer. "You're sure about this? It won't be easy, managing both." "I'm sure," Willa nodded. "The school matters to me, Jackson, almost as much as our family." "Then we'll make it work," he promised. Together, as darkness fell and lanterns were lit around the celebration, Ben approached with the wagon decorated with ribbons and flowers that would take them to the ranch, their home now. Truly theirs together. "Time to get these little ones home," Ben announced, nodding towards Samuel and Lily, who were fighting yawns despite their determination to continue celebrating. "I'll bring them along later with Mrs. Peterson." The original plan had been for the children to stay in town with Mrs. Peterson while Jackson and Willa had a few days alone at the ranch for their honeymoon. But as they prepared to leave, Lily's eyes filled with tears. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" Willa asked, kneeling down to her level despite her wedding finery. "I want to come home with you and Papa," Lily said, her lower lip trembling. "I don't want to stay in town." Samuel, standing beside his sister, nodded in agreement. "We want to be there when you come home for the first time as our mother," he explained with his usual directness. "It's important." Jackson and Willa exchanged glances, a silent communication passing between them. Without words, they reached the same conclusion. "Of course you can come home with us," Jackson said, lifting Lily into his arms. "Our first night as a family should be together." The relief on both children's faces was worth any sacrifice of privacy. As they climbed into the decorated wagon, the townspeople cheered and threw flower petals, calling out good wishes and blessings. The ride home under the stars was peaceful, with Lily falling asleep against Willa's side and Samuel fighting to keep his eyes open as he pointed out constellations they passed. "Not exactly the romantic wedding night most brides expect," Jackson murmured apologetically as they approached the ranch, lamplight glowing welcomingly from windows Mrs. Peterson must have lit before leaving for town. Willa smiled, looking down at the sleeping children. "It's perfect," she assured him. "Absolutely perfect." And as they carried the children inside, settled them in their beds, and finally stood together in the doorway of what was now their shared bedroom, Jackson knew she meant it. They had found in each other not just romantic love, but the healing of a family made whole again. "Welcome home, Mrs. Wade," he whispered, gathering her into his arms. "I've been home since I found you," Willa replied, her eyes shining with love and promise. "All of you." Epilogue. 2 years later, Papa, Mama, come quick. Lily's excited voice carried across the yard as Jackson and Willa returned from checking the new calves in the south pasture. "Baby Joseph is standing up by himself." They hurried into the house to find their 10-month-old son gripping the edge of a chair, his chubby legs wobbling as he maintained his balance with a look of intense concentration on his face. "Look at you, little man." Jackson crouched down, arms outstretched. "Can you come to Papa?" Joseph's face split into a gummy smile, revealing his first 2 teeth. With careful determination, he released his hold on the chair and took one tottering step forward before plopping down on his well-padded bottom. "He did it," Samuel exclaimed from where he'd been vigilantly watching his baby brother. Now 9 years old, Samuel had taken his role as eldest sibling with serious responsibility, especially after Joseph's birth the previous summer. Willa knelt beside Jackson, her face alight with pride. "You're growing so fast, my darling," she cooed, gathering Joseph into her arms as he crawled the remaining distance toward them. The baby babbled happily, reaching up to pat his mother's cheek with a sticky hand. At nearly a year old, Joseph Wade was the image of his father, with dark hair and serious eyes that could quickly transform into mischievous delight. "Letters came today," Lily announced, now 7 and reading independently. One from Aunt Margaret in Boston and one from the school board. Willa accepted the envelopes, curious about the school board communication. After Joseph's birth, she had reduced her teaching to 3 days a week, with a young woman from town assisting on the other days. It had been a good arrangement, allowing her to balance motherhood with the career she loved. "What does it say?" Jackson asked as she opened the official-looking letter. "They're expanding the school," Willa read, excitement growing in her voice. "The railroad has brought so many new families that they need to add a second classroom and another full-time teacher. They're asking if I would consider becoming the school's principal while continuing to teach the older students." "That's wonderful news," Jackson said, genuine pride in his voice. "You've earned their respect and trust." "It would mean more responsibility," Willa mused, bouncing Joseph on her knee as she considered the offer. "But also more opportunity to shape the school's future. If anyone can manage it, you can," Jackson assured her. "Besides, you have an excellent support system." He gestured around at their thriving household, Samuel helping with ranch accounts at the table, Lily arranging wildflowers in a vase she'd made herself at school, Joseph contentedly exploring the world from the safety of his mother's lap. "I do, don't I?" Willa smiled, her heart full as she looked at the family they had built together. "I'll accept the position." Later that evening, after the children were asleep, Jackson and Willa sat on the porch swing that had become their favorite spot for quiet conversation. The ranch spread before them, bathed in moonlight larger now, with new barns and expanded pastures reflecting their combined success. "Did you ever imagine this?" Willa asked, her head resting against his shoulder as they swayed gently. "When you were at your lowest point, did you ever think you could find this kind of happiness again?" Jackson considered the question, his arm tightening around her shoulders. "No," he admitted honestly. "After Emma died, I thought that part of my life was over. I was just existing for the children's sake, going through the motions." "What changed?" Willa asked softly. Jackson smiled, pressing a kiss to her temple. "You did. You showed up half dead from a stage robbery and somehow breathed life back into all of us. You made my children laugh again when I'd forgotten how to do that myself." "I think we saved each other," Willa reflected. "I was running away as much as I was running towards something when I came west. Looking for purpose, for belonging." "And did you find it?" Jackson asked, though he knew the answer. Willa raised her face to his, love shining in her eyes. "I found everything I never knew I was looking for," she whispered. "A home, a family, a love that heals and grows stronger every day." As their lips met in a tender kiss, the sound of Joseph's soft cries came through the open window. "I'll go," Jackson said, rising from the swing. "You rest." Willa watched him go, marveling at how completely this man had embraced his second chance at life and love. In the nursery window, she could see his silhouette as he lifted their son, cradling him with practiced ease while murmuring soothing words. This was the legacy they were building together, not just in land and livestock, but in the hearts of their children. Samuel's growing confidence, Lily's boundless creativity, baby Joseph's secure happiness, all testaments to the healing power of love and the family they had forged from separate sorrows. As Jackson returned to the porch with Joseph settled contentedly against his shoulder, Willa felt a wave of gratitude so profound it brought tears to her eyes. "What is it?" Jackson asked, concern crossing his face as he sat beside her. "Just thinking how fortunate we are," she said, reaching out to stroke Joseph's downy head. "To have found each other. To have this second chance." Jackson's free hand found hers, their fingers intertwining as they had that day by the pond when they first began to acknowledge their feelings for each other. "Not just a second chance," he corrected gently. "A new beginning. Every day with you and our children is exactly that, not a replacement for what was lost, but something precious and perfect in its own right." As they sat together in the moonlight, their sleeping son between them and their older children safe in their beds, Willa knew with absolute certainty that this was where she belonged. In this house that had known both sorrow and joy. With this man who had learned to love again despite his fears. With these children who had welcomed her into their hearts. This was home. This was family. This was love in its most healing, transformative form, bringing laughter where there had been silence, hope where there had been despair, and new dreams where old ones had been laid to rest. And it was enough. More than enough. It was everything.